Okay, and I believe we are live. I am really excited to be here for a special interview that we have set up for you with a wonderful human being that I got to meet. I had the pleasure of having a beautiful conversation with a few weeks ago. So there will be an upcoming podcast coming out. But I am Kitty Shambliss of Loving Without Boundaries, and I am here with Ali Press. So super excited to be here, and we are going live in a couple different places. So if you are a part of our community in the Facebook group, which is a private group, that's Loving Without Boundaries, Healthy Open Relationships and Lifestyle Freedom. You can do a search for that on Facebook if you'd like to come into our community to have a sense of being around like-minded individuals. And also, if you're seeing us on other platforms, we're excited to see you there as well. And if you're already a part of our private community, we are glad to be able to give you beautiful content with amazing human beings like this beautiful person I'm here with today. So I'm going to go ahead and read your bio, if that's okay.
Sure, yeah.
And happy to be here with you. Our bio here today is: trapped in a repeating daily nightmare of their own making, Ali quit drinking for good in April 2017, drinking away their needs, desires, and wants to be whatever people around them expected had been their go-to for far too long. Quitting meant embracing not being like the others and addressing a lifetime's boundaryless people-pleasing. 7 years on, and through numerous deep dives into their core wounds, Ali has changed how they show up in the world, what they do, and how they date and relate. Ali now supports others through therapeutic coaching to make changes for themselves and build lives they no longer want to numb out. So I honor your journey, and I want to thank you for your time and your courage in telling your story, which I'm sure will inspire so many other people. So welcome, and I'm excited for our conversation.
Thank you. I'm really excited too, and it's really good to see you again and to be back having another conversation.
You too. You too. So I'd love it if we'll just touch on a few different things, but is there anything
Mm.
you'd like to say just in a brief introductory way before I kind of get started with more of an interview style question?
Yeah,
Any
I mean, I think you've said it all. I just sort of say hello. I'm Ali, and yeah, I'm based in London, in the UK, in South London, and I work as a therapeutic coach. I've done an awful lot of kind of self-development work over the last 7 years, and I've wrapped all of that up together in my counselling training, my coaching training, and here I am now, coming out the other side. I don't know if you ever do come out the other side, do you? Do you just keep going through the thing?
I would say so myself. Yeah, I'm also a coach in a different framework. And yeah,
Mm.
I really believe that we are all growing and evolving and transforming, and we never get to that nirvana. We're striving to get to that nirvana, but we can have some
Yeah.
leaps and bounds along the way, which to me is partly what your story is all about.
Yeah, totally. It just reminded me actually of a thing. I think it was in a movie I watched where they were saying that like you're not done until the moment you die. Everything else is change, growth, renewal. You're doing.
Mhm.
So yeah, we don't go through to the other side. We just
Yeah,
get better.
exactly. I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. And I honor your journey. So I'd love to just start with going back in time just a little bit, if that's okay with you.
sure.
And just when you were growing up,
Mm.
what was there a moment in time where you realized that maybe you were a little bit different than the other kids around you, or that you were going to be lucky in a different way? If you can just take me back a little bit and we'll kind of keep going forward in time to bring us up to now.
Sure. Yeah. Gosh. So I mean, in terms of knowing I was different, if I think right back to primary school, I was in the second year of infants, and I kind of knew that I knew then that I wasn't like the others who were around me because I wasn't interacting socially in the same sorts of ways. I didn't have a framework to talk about this back then, but what I could see was that they had these friendship groups, they knew what to do, what to talk about, how to be. And I sort of stood awkwardly on the side, wondering what was wrong with me. Why didn't I have whatever it is that they had. Where did they get it from? Where was mine? And that was, gosh, so I was probably about 7 then, really, 6 or 7. And as I was coming up to 10, I started to become more aware of my sexuality. And again, I could feel this sort of difference, because there was all this like playground talk about this boy, that boy, pop bands, that kind of thing. And again, it was things that I just sort of didn't really relate to. I didn't relate to looking at guys and thinking, oh yeah, fancy some of that, or even in that sort of childish way that you would at that age. And I remember being slightly fascinated by the word lesbian in the dictionary. I thought, that may well be me. And I had this kind of strong core sense of that. But also around the time that I was like coming up to that age, we're going through the early to mid 80s, the AIDS crisis was rampant across the world. There were all these dire pieces of, I'm going to put this in bunny ears, advice about homosexuality being so wrong, so kind of against God, and this idea that was propagated in people that were close to me, that AIDS was God's disease for gay people and so on. So the idea that I could be gay was just completely like cut off. That was not something that was going to be allowed, going to be livable. And like looking back on it now, those awful kinds of ideas around the AIDS crisis and around HIV were absolutely terrible. And looking at people around me, I didn't know anybody like firsthand who was gay or queer in any kind of way at all. There were various pop stars and so on that I knew about. So we had Boy George and Culture Club, the Pet Shop Boys, Frankie Goes to Hollywood and so on. And that was kind of all okay, because that was people like in the media and so on, and it was nothing really to do with my life, my family's lives and so on. It was sort of out there, whereas what we did or would do or expected to do was something completely different to that. So yeah, that was really tricky, and I think that was my first experience of having to, or feeling like I had to, squash down something that was a really core part of who I am.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I'm also grew up through the 80s, so I remember having some of those similar thoughts, watching, like you said, the Pet Shop Boys, David Bowie, and seeing that kind of gender fluidity, and I was fascinated by it. We hadn't really seen that much before that, yet I didn't really know what to think about that. I can definitely appreciate what you were saying as well. So as you were navigating all that, how was it really difficult to really lean into who you really were, like being your most authentic self, and how did that translate into starting to numb out?
Yeah, that sort of sense of authenticity, I didn't really get that until I was in my early 40s, because that sort of numbing stuff out thing began when I was 14 and carried on for the better part of the next 27 years.
Wow.
And I'd had sort of these messages that I just mentioned then, but then also I went to this all-girls school, and the idea that anybody might be gay was completely not allowed, so not really there in my friendship circle. Some of the school were boarders, so they would have dorm rooms there, and the idea that anybody in there might actually be a lesbian, it was like shock, horror. So again, I was getting these messages that was not something that was acceptable, that wasn't something that I was allowed to be. And coming through my sort of early teens, I was like, well, right, this isn't for me. This isn't something that I can do. I have to get myself a boyfriend. So I did. I tried to be straight, and I tried to have boyfriends. And it really wasn't authentically me at all. It wasn't great in any way. And I guess it took till I was at university, when I was around about 19, I suppose, that I felt confident enough to actually come out. I'd chosen my university based on, did they have in their brochure a mention of an LGBT society? It was LGB back in those days, but I thought at least if it was out there, there is a place for me, even though when I got there, I was actually too terrified to join because I'd internalized all these messages so hard. It was just like so tight inside me that I could not be that person. I couldn't be who I was. That was the worst thing about it.
Yeah, it really brings to mind a quote I was saying earlier on a different interview, which is a quote from a gentleman named Jonathan Fields, that in order to be unapologetically joyful, you need to be unapologetically you. And I can really feel the struggle that you were having back then as a young person. Like you weren't able to really, you didn't feel you could, or you didn't believe that you could completely be yourself, whether it was because of the environment that you were in or your own internal dialogue, right?
Yeah, totally. And that saps out any kind of joy, because if you can't be who you really are, then who are you? You're pretending, you're trying to be somebody else. And yeah, that's not a good way to go.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me a little bit more about when it was the early days of numbing out through alcohol. Like, did that start with
Mm.
drinking in college? Like, I know that's when I started drinking in high school, and then even more in college. But what were like those early days like?
Yeah, so I started in high school also, and part of it was this bit in me that wanted to fit in, because what I'd seen around me was that drinking was always part of everything that you did. You're going to have fun, you drink. You're having a party, loads of drinks. Going out for dinner, obviously you'll have drink with that. So it was just a kind of a ubiquitous thing in my life, and I wanted to have fun. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to enjoy myself. So I thought some drink would help with that. But it really wasn't that long in terms of like numbers of years before things started to get out of control. And I can remember when I was about 17, I was hanging out with my mate Bob, and another friend of ours who was the daughter of a local hotel owner. And she said to me that she thought I was drinking too much and I should probably calm it down a bit. And I was like a rabbit in headlights, because I think part of me knew already that this was not good, because whilst I was sort of going from, I don't know, 3 pints to 4 pints as my tolerance was going up. And also, like, I didn't have loads of money back in those days because I was working as a care assistant in a care home and helping to make dinners on weekend evenings and so on. So I was feeling this buzz and I was kind of enjoying that. But I also started to notice how good it was for like numbing out some of that discomfort that I felt, because you have that disinhibitory effect anyway, where you can start to be or feel like you're more funny, more better company to be around, or whatever it is. But it also was helping deal with some of my anxieties as well. And I remember by the time I got to university, the day that my parents dropped me off, actually, I had a can of lager in one of my boxes and they'd gone. And I thought, oh, what am I going to do now? Full of anxiety, because there I am, 18, fresh into this new environment with a whole bunch of strangers who I'd never met before and so on. Thinking, what the hell do I even do? Like, I need to go to the loo, which means I've got to leave my room, go across the corridor. Oh, what's that going to be like? So, drank my first beer, and then we went to the bar and so on. But I can remember sitting there in bed, like drinking spirits, neat spirits, purely because they would numb out how awful I felt in that environment, how out of place I was, and how terrified I was of everything, the whole kind of having to make friends, be in this new environment, get on with things. And I think that's when it really started to be a problem. And I can remember my friend Colette around that time saying, I think you're an alcoholic. And I was just absolutely terrified, rabbit in headlights again, thinking, no, that's not me, not me. Obviously was me. So my defenses went sky high, and just carried on doing what I was doing. It wasn't good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what would you say are some of the either emotions or some of the thoughts that were going through your head that you were attempting to numb out at that time?
Oh, so one of the big one was social anxiety.
Mm.
Um, and I think that very much relates to what I now know is my neurodivergence.
Mm.
I knew I wasn't like the others. My queerness, but I wasn't out, was meaning that I wasn't like the others. And I had a fairly awful time in high school. I didn't really have too many friends. I didn't really have too many people that I'd hang out with and so on. I was just kind of getting by. So it was almost like I missed this entire part where you learn how to make friends and relate with the people that are around you and so on. And then when I went to this week at tertiary college, I went to this technical college and I studied electrical engineering, which is what I ended up doing at university. I was in this environment with, oh gosh, there must be 25 other guys. I was the only AFAB person in our group. And I found that way, way easier because there wasn't all of the kind of social expectations that AFAB people around me were having. There wasn't the same talk about hair and clothes and makeup and boys and stuff that I just wasn't into. So I was much, much happier in that environment. But again, it wasn't really conducive to learning how to make like proper friendships. So I got to university absolutely without skills in that area and terrified of how to break out of that. And I thought drinking was going to be one of my ways, which sounds really bizarre now to say that. But I thought if I could invent myself this new persona of some kind of party person, then I'd be fun. People would want to hang out with me. But I think actually what happened was that I turned into a bit of an asshole and people avoided me even more. So, yeah, when I say trapped in a repeating daily nightmare of my own making, that's part of it, because it wasn't just the end part where the compulsions were way too strong and so on like that. It was that part as well where I wasn't able to tap into who I really was because I was so desperately trying to be liked, to be wanted, to be like other people, to be fun, be invited places and so on.
Yeah. I really, again, want to honor just your vulnerability and your honesty. I'm sure a lot of people, myself included, hearing your story can resonate with that. I mean, we've all had different social anxieties at different moments in time and want to fit in, even though we don't realize that sometimes it's great to be unique. Being different, it can be awesome, right?
It's a superpower.
Yeah,
Totally.
exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what was there a moment where, and from our previous conversation, I know there were several moments where you attempted to quit. When you got later on to that more like almost like a functional alcoholic, tell me a little bit more about that time when you were like, oh my gosh, I need to do something. Like, was there either a moment or what came up?
Yeah. So I quit for the first time when I was about 20 or 21, and lasted around about 3 months. And I mentioned a bit about that in my last, the last chat that we had. The second time I was 30 or 31, so a decade later.
Yeah.
And I knew then that things were really, really out of control, because it wasn't just the few glasses of wine when my partner came home for dinner, that kind of thing. I was hiding it. I was having sneaky drinks here and there, and I was starting to get into a really, really bad place with it. So my daytime functioning was very much on low power mode because I felt so awful. And it really got to the point where I just felt I couldn't go on like that anymore. I was desperate for something to be different. I had to really pull up my big girl pants and do something about it. So I went to see my GP, who was actually really, really awesome. I was terrified about doing it, but he was lovely, and that was really, really helpful. And I guess one of the sort of key memories that I have from that time was just how rubbish I felt day to day, and how unhappy I was, unhappy with my job, where I was in the world. I was living in Cornwall at the time, which is beautiful, but it does have, you know, some other things going on around sort of tourism and out of season work and so on. And I just felt really, really trapped. I was in a relationship that wasn't working for me. And that was another thing that was adding to the amount that I was drinking. We moved down there together for my then partner's promotion to be a deputy head teacher. And sort of in the run up to us moving, I had an interview for this really awesome job that I liked. I was already doing it as a temp, and I'd had the interview and it was pretty much in the bag. And then she got this job and I'm like, so now I have to like abandon that plan and go on with our plans to move to Cornwall. And I can remember sitting there on the day that we left, because I had to stay back for an exam at university, because I actually went around the whole process again later in life, and feeling utterly miserable. Like moving to Cornwall was just absolutely not what I wanted to do, but kind of powerless to speak up about it, because by then it was already too late. But it wasn't the first time that thought had occurred to me. So I guess, yeah, that's the first time that what I was doing to myself really started to hit home.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And I know from our previous conversation, it was that third attempt, your third go at it where you succeeded.
Yeah.
And
yes,
what was it that was different about that time that really helped you to conquer that monkey on your back?
Yeah, so it was community. Finding other people like me was an absolute game changer. I was in this barber shop in Hackney, waiting for my turn to have my hair cut, and there was me, Clara, who's the barber, and another customer having their hair cut. And I knew from like previous visits they had these flyers for a group called Queers Without Beers, and I was kind of attracted to it and was looking at it, but I didn't want anybody to know I was looking at it. So I'd be sitting there trying to side eye it like this so nobody would see me looking at it. And then eventually, after probably my fourth haircut in a row of actually doing this, I swiped one and I quickly shoved it in my bag, just in case anybody else in there, bearing in mind one's cutting hair, one's having their hair cut, saw me do it. And that was the thing. It was finding people who'd been somewhere near where I had, people who were like me, people who'd had not necessarily the same kinds of experiences, but different pressures, different whatevers that kind of all came out in this over drinking pattern, and the over drinking being used to squash down all of those discordances and that discomfort and the emotions that you kind of don't want to deal with. So yeah, it was life-changing. It was there that I learned how to do it. It was there that they practically handed me the keys to my life and said, right, here you go then. It was amazing.
That's incredible. And I love the name Queers Without Beers. It's so awesome. Has that organization, has that been around for a while? I'd never heard of it before. I'm sure it's also pond over by you, but still, that's interesting.
Yeah, so Queers Without Beers was an offshoot of an organization called Club Soda. And it was sort of through Club Soda that I joined this bigger group of people, which I think was around 4,500 people at the time. And by the time the group closed in May of last year, it was getting close to sort of 18,000 people. So massive community, loads and loads of other people a bit like me. So yeah, once I'd kind of joined the group and I started to go into some of their socials and things, and actually, so it took me 6 months to get all my like ducks in a row and actually get stopped for good with drinking, because there were like little tries and fails, try and fail, try and fail. But the community were awesome in all of that, because never once did they say, after I'd been off on doing whatever I was doing and come back, never once did they say to me, no, you're too bad, out. They just said, right, yeah, come on back in, pick yourself up, what do you need? And that support was just wonderful. So I actually started volunteering for them as a volunteer admin for their Facebook group, and I actually became a trustee of Queers Without Beers, which I was really, really proud of.
That's amazing.
Yeah, because it had been so central to changing my life. Like, I was going to say everything that I did, but it was everything that I did. That I really, really wanted to give back. I really wanted to put into that community as much as I'd taken out, because, and I kind of still hold with this now, is that if I can somehow save somebody even an ounce of the shit that I went through, whether it's through sharing my story or providing support or something like that, then I want to do it, because that life for me was hell. And it's a really lonely, difficult, and horrible place to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you again so much for sharing your story. And I know we talked in our earlier conversation that there is alcoholism in my family as well, where my mother
Mm.
struggled up until the day she died. So I deeply, deeply admire the work that you're doing, and I'm honestly just so proud of you too that you
Oh,
were able to overcome it. Seriously,
thank
because
you.
it's not easy, and it's such an inspiration. And
Mm.
I realized as we were talking that I'm delighted to see that there, I think I believe there is no coincidences, right? So I think it's great that we needed to reschedule this, because that means we're talking during Pride Month here.
Yes, yes.
I didn't realize until we were chatting here. And I recently put a quote on my Facebook wall that says, of course, on a rainbow background, pride is
Mm.
important because somebody tonight still believes they're better off dead than being gay. And I just thought, wow, um,
That really hits hard,
yeah.
because you're absolutely right.
Mhm. Yeah, and
Yeah.
so to me, it really coincides with your story, in that when we do have like an addiction like you're describing, it's almost like a slow death. Um,
Mm.
so I'm
Yeah.
really honored that and excited for you for a million reasons that you were able to conquer that. You were able to like slay the dragon. And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
get
And it was a fucking big dragon. It really
yeah. It is a fucking great dragon. So deeply,
yeah.
deeply honored. And I so honor the work that you're doing now by giving back, both from the organizations and also by the therapeutic coaching that you're doing now. So before
Yeah.
we start to wind up our call, our interview here, is there anything that you would like, a message you would like to leave, or a question I didn't ask you that you would like to touch on for our watchers and our listeners?
Um, yeah, I was just wondering if we could touch on why I got in touch in the first place. And that was
Sure.
to do with it was a message that I saw in a different group, a poly group. And it was about somebody who found themselves over drinking when their nesting partner was out on dates, and how that really wasn't speaking to their core values. And
Mm,
like, I'd been in this group for, I don't know, maybe a year or so at this point, very much on the learning side, because no rubbers hit the road yet on my side. And I was thinking, yeah, I could help here, because most of the other advice I sort of read and I take in, and I'm like, yeah, I can get this, and it's really helpful. But this one, I was like, yeah, stand back, lads, I've got this one. And I was able to give this person some really like solid help around like the drinking piece, but the drinking piece never really exists in a vacuum. It's always influenced by emotions or by whatever, and whatever's going on with you. And that was why I got in touch, because this is that kind of emotional regulation thing and using alcohol or substances or whatever to like numb stuff down, that stuff never really goes away. It kind of needs to, you need to meet it head on in some way, which needs support, and which is why I really appreciate the group that you run and the amazing people that are in there, the advice people share so freely, much like I was talking about with the Club Soda group and Queers Without Beers, because I don't know, it feels kind of similar, like people saving somebody else an ounce of the pain that they went through their advice. Maybe something like that. Yeah. And I guess, I suppose, in terms of like final things that I'd want to share, that would be that if there's like anything in what I've said or anything in your kind of own world where you feel like, yeah, drinking is not really serving me in quite the way that I'd like it to, reach out to somebody. There are people out there who've been somewhere similar, and you don't need to sit there and struggle with it on your own. You don't need to sit there in that isolation and that loneliness, feeling like you're the only person who is doing whatever it is that you're doing, because almost certainly you're not.
Such a beautiful message. And I thank you for sharing why you reached out and how you became a part of our community here. And I literally started the blog Loving Without Boundaries back in December 2012, partly because of exactly what you described. I felt very alone. You know, I thought I was the only person struggling with jealousy and multiple relationships. And I thought,
Yeah.
gotta be somebody else out there. Let me just start this blog and see what happens. And
put it out there and see who comes.
yeah,
And it's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that kind of analogy of following the white rabbit. So the blog led to the podcast, which led to me becoming a coach, and all these doors started opening to the point that somebody as amazing and triumphant in your own struggles as you reached out to me. So it's just magic what we can create when we're vulnerable, when we raise our hand and say, hey, I need some help, you know?
Yeah, totally. And then we all get to link up hands and do things together, which is way more powerful than existing on our own in our little silos.
Yeah. And way more fun as well.
Yes. Yeah, we're back to joy. Let's have more joy.
Exactly. Yeah. We bring it back to the joy. Thank you. That was a great way to full circle. Well, just deeply love the conversation. And so for anybody watching this who also may not be a part of our community, just to remind you again, our Loving Without Boundaries community, it's a private group on Facebook. We are 14,000, I believe almost 300 people strong now. And that's been being built ever since 2015. And I can tell you also during the pandemic, it exploded, which to me just said a lot. Like people had some time on their hands, and they were sometimes sitting on the sidelines like, hey, I think I might be not quite sure how I identify or who I am or how I want to be in relationships. Let me check out this group. And that's just been a beautiful journey. And so I really appreciate you reaching out and sharing your story, Allie. You're such a beautiful soul who I hope to continue to get to know. I'm happy to have you back again.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. How can people find you and your work if what you're saying is resonating with them and they
I mainly do my stuff through my website, so you'll find it out there at alipress.uk. And there's a load of info there, and like I think every page has an email Ali button on it, so you can drop me a line and get in touch, and then we could have a chat about where you're at and kind of what you might want to do differently and how you might go about it. So that's sort of the main place where I am. I exist on Facebook, although that's like more personal sort of stuff. And I just wanted to say also what a pleasure it's been for me and what an honor it's been to be having these chats with you and to feature on your podcast and so on, because it just comes back to the power of community, I think, and that kind of joining up together and saying, these are our differences, and here we are living our best lives.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, here are differences that we can honor and celebrate, instead instead of condemn, and also hear
Yeah.
our similarities, and celebrate
Yeah.
as well. Yeah, and I love that, again, I'm over here in the United States, you're across the pond over in the UK, and we have the technology, to be able to have these conversations and to
Yeah.
be able to use our voices and in a lot of ways these platforms,
Yeah.
and be able to, and this community was created out of scratch. So be able to use our ingenuity and our creativity to get the support and the love and the education or the coaching that we need. So
Mm.
I
Yeah.
really encourage anybody watching. I mean, if you are struggling, if you are feeling really deeply alone, loneliness is also a killer, right? Um,
Totally.
yeah,
Yes.
and we can be numbing that out, whether it's with alcohol or drugs or distracting ourselves maybe with video games to the point that it's becoming a problem. Like, there's lots of different ways that we can be numbing out. Know that we are here. We care about you and your success and you living your most authentic life. So just a big hug to everyone who is looking for support. Know that support is
Yeah.
out there. I encourage you to find the right community that feels good to you and raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to join, or hey, I need some help, or
Yeah.
hey, I have a problem and I don't know how to solve it.
Yeah. Just like, hey, here I am. Help me.
Yeah,
Whatever it is.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Allie, I just really, really appreciate you and your story. And I have a confidence that this isn't going to be the last conversation that we have. And I just applaud you and your work. And I hope that you keep going with it. And I'm sure you will in some capacity, because it's
Yeah.
an inspiring journey, inspiring story that you've shared.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you very much. It's been a real privilege to chat to you again this afternoon.
Thank you so much. All right, everyone. We will talk to you next time. Thank you for tuning in or watching the recording, and know that we are here for you. And we also hope you're having a wonderful week and a great year.
Awesome.